TimMX here, and today I want to show you an alternate way to get better contrast in your footage, especially if you want to focus attention on a specific area, like me in this shot on my friend's face. It is a more accurate way to achieve better highlights and shadows, and in addition I want to show you a method to get more out of your skin tones. So that video is not too long. I'll show you the individual steps based on already existing notes. Today I've already prepared it for the sake of the simplicity. So let's start. As my first step, I created a serial node and created my skin tone mask as a HSL qualifier, as I always do. Let's have a look at the vector scope. As you can see, I adjusted the skin tone very near to the skin tone line, but keep it a little slight on the side of the reds. This is done by a little adjustment on the offset on the primaries. That's a very common way to adjust the skin tones, and in a second step I raise the custom curve a bit in the middle. This lifts the face a little bit more from the rest of the picture content. The next node is my highlight lifter node. On this node I did a HSL qualifier again by addressing only the most top highlights, as you can see here if I toggle the selection on and off. I turned the hue and saturation off and used only the luminance, as you can see here. Then I raise the gain on the primaries just a bit. Don't forget to denoise your selection enough and make an low soft. My third step addresses the face shadows. I use a mask of the skin node and added a HSL qualifier for the upper shadows on the face, leaving the darkest shadow parts untouched. Then I added a very light and subtle color to this qualifier using the color generator. It's very light and subtle saturated green yellowish tone. And then in this custom curve I raised the darkest parts and lowered the mids and highs. Finally I raised the gamma on the primaries, a very subtle, as you can see here. If I turn the first three nodes on and off, you can see the result. But let's step further. The fourth node is a simple power window, selecting the face. A very important hint: in DaVinci Resolve you always have to crank up the softness of the power window, otherwise you get harsh results. Then I raised the custom curve again in the middle to highlight the whole face a bit more. As a last step on this node, I sharpened up this face selection just a bit to give it a bit more structure. If you are unsure what amount you should use, just another hint: decrease the radius to 48. That's the best value for sharpening skins, and this value is bulletproof. Finally, I added an outer node to my face matte node and compressed the shadows by lowering the shadows and keeping the mids and highlights using a simple S-curve on the custom curve. And again, if I toggle on and off my steps so far, you can see the difference. Now, have a look at the vector scope. Can you see what happens? I stretched the upper mids and highlights, what is resulting in much softer roll off and keeping the darkest shadows dark, and enlarge the span between highlights and mids on the one hand and the shadows on the other hand. That's the trick. The rule is quite simple: keeping or lowering your shadows a bit and rise your mids and highlights in different amounts, and try to enlarge the amount of these ranges. Now we have a very partial contrast and much better highlights and mids in the skin and the affected parts of the skin tone mask on the footage. That's the most important rule. First, add partial contrast, then riser contrast on the whole image. So now we can add a bit of contrast. I've done it on the next node, here labeled as contrast by using the log wheels. I decreased the shadows and lifted up the highlights just a bit. As always, keep an eye on the parade and keep track of your image. And don't go too far. If I now toggle on and off this contrast node, you can see that the mids almost stays the same, but the shadows and highlights are stretched again. That's it. In my opinion, there's enough contrast in this picture and the face is much stronger than the rest of this picture content. But there's something more we can do. Let's look at the face. Can you see the red on this face? Let's try to get more life into the face. Again, I did a HSL quire file selecting the reds on the face, and then I pushed the saturation just a little bit, as you can see here. And that's it. By turning on and off this node, you can see the addressed reds in the parade and in the image too. For sure, that's a very subtle change, but the skin gets more rich, more alive. And now we have finished. And if I turn on and off all these nodes, you can see the difference. As always, this is only one technique to get a very partial differentiated contrast, but without masks or mattes in the terms of DaVinci Resolve, you will never get such good results. And the best is, you can always adjust each part of this contrast node separately afterwards. It's a very powerful method in my opinion. And so I hope I could show you an interesting way to achieve much better contrast in your footage, especially in skin tones. And if you want to see more like this, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. You all a great time. Bye.